Right, I'll make a start. Good evening and welcome to Crawley Borough Council's Cabinet of the 25th of June. I am Councillor Michael Jones, Leader of the Council and Chair of the Cabinet. There are no scheduled fire drills tonight, so in the event of the fire alarm sounding, please leave the building via the main spiral staircase and through the main reception doors. Once outside, please turn left and make your way to the fire assembly point located beyond the multi-storey car park on Exchange Road. If you're unable to use the stairs, please wait in the council chamber and you'll be guided by a member of staff to the evacuation lift. This meeting is being live streamed via the council's YouTube channel. Please note there is a no comments function available as part of this webcasting. The council is the data controller and will retain the data collected during this webcast. This will be done so in accordance with the council's published data retention policy. Any members of the public seated in the public gallery should be aware that by entering the chamber, they are consenting to their image being captured by the automated camera system. Recordings will be used for webcasting and/or training purposes. Councillors are reminded to take note of what is displayed on the screens in the room, as this shows what is being recorded and webcast. Cameras are currently set to capture you in seated positions, so please remain seated when speaking. You can request to speak as usual in committees by raising your hand. To speak by pressing the button with the face on it, and the microphone will go green when you are live. We will now commence with apologies for absence. Have we received any apologies for absence?
Yes, Chair. We've received apologies from Councillor Yasmin Khan, Councillor Hilton, and apologies for lateness from Councillor Chris Mullins and Councillor Sue Mullins.
Thank you. Disclosures of interest. Does any member have any disclosures of interest? Not seeing any. Thank you. So now we come to the minutes of the meetings held on the 4th of June. Does the Cabinet agree that the minutes are an accurate record of the meetings? Thank you. That's agreed. Public question time. We have 15 minutes for this. I will invite each person in turn to the table at the front of the public seating area to ask their question, which must be a question, not a statement, and be related to the functions of the Cabinet. It must not relate to an individual case or duplicate, and in essence, a question which has been put to the Cabinet in the past 6 months. If you can state your name, which ward you live in, and then ask your question. And then I will then invite other councillors or officers to respond. You may then ask one supplementary question which should relate to your original question or the response given to it. So I think, Mr. Harmon, if you'd like to come and ask your question. Okay. Well, I'll be tolerant, but if you can switch your microphone on. Yeah.
I'm not. Thank you, Chair, for letting me speak tonight. I'm Trevor Harmon, and I live in Ifield in Crawley. I own an award-winning company in Crawley, building company, and I've lived here since the year 2000. I'm here tonight to ask a question about Agenda 9 demolition projects. This is not a moan at councillors or the Cabinet. I trust all the parties, Conservatives and Labour, that they're doing the best they can for Crawley and the residents. When I build in Crawley, I ensure the labour I employ in the local area and I believe supporting local communities and jobs. When building our properties, 60% is labour and subcontractors from Crawley, 30% is West Sussex, 10% is further afield. Crawley Council has signed up to social charter committed to Crawley. Create employment opportunities in Crawley, make all subcontractor opportunities accessible, including local supplies and SME, etc. Then prior to also notes in this, it says definition of the local is priority order is described as people, companies located in the Crawley postcode area, Gatwick Diamond postcodes and wider Sussex. When the tender documents came out for the demolition of Longley House, a quality score was adopted: buying locally, excellent if within 30 miles, weak if within 45 miles, urgent response within an hour, recycling 81 to 100%, location of recycling centre excellent within 30 miles of the town or weak without. Before Longley House was bought by the council, I was approached by the premises landlord to get demolition quotes, which I did. I went and got 3 of the best quotes I could, 2 of which I've used in the past myself. These prices I have with me tonight. I'm aware of additional costs that would need to be added: scaffolding, hoarding, ramps and national railways. My question to the Cabinet is as follows: when the tenders were reduced down to the final 6 to price, Only one of the companies was in West Sussex and around 10 miles away, not one from Crawley. All the other tenders were from Alpington in Kent, Erith in Kent, Portsmouth in Hampshire, Hertfordshire, Kent, again Canterbury, and in Burgess Hill. My question is, why was the demolition contract awarded to a company 76 miles away? And I'm thinking of the carbon footprint around the M25. Was this not the best price contract? And it's 3 times the true price to carry out the demolition, as I have quotes here. Can I ask the Cabinet to call this back to relook at this? The money saved by going to the best contract or best value contract could be used locally to maybe rebuild the retaining walls around Longley House to save the future build costs for Crawley homes when you build the flats, tree work on the site in East Park to make it look better for residents, construct hard standings ready for construction, save on the build budget, support the Mayor's charities, sponsor Crawley in Bloom next year so we could win an award like we used to in the town, and clear the site by the railway, which Longley House is part of that redevelopment site. All this would save Crawley homes money for the future and help keep council tax down. I can confirm tonight that I could, given the right opportunities, I could save the council about 105,000, which I'm happy to share, but not now. I trust the Cabinet will look into this and ask for it to be re-evaluated. I thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Harman. Although there is something in Agenda Item 9 that refers to Longley House, that's actually the development of the site. I think you're referring to the demolition of the site where the decision has been taken and the contract awarded. I am personally very committed to social value and realising what's in the policy. I feel a little restricted in what I can say tonight, but what I can say is listen carefully to what you've had to say, and what I'll do is I'll take it up with officers and we'll look to get a response on this. Yeah. Sorry.
I know how much it should really cost, and I know when councils get involved, the prices go up. It's 3 times what it really should be.
Well, okay. Well, I mean, we
and I can show you.
Sure. Okay. Well,
now.
we always strive for best value. I can assure you, Mr. Harman. But what I'll do is we'll look into what you've raised tonight, and if there's anything you want to send me directly, then I will also make sure that receives attention, and
more than happy to.
And I will give it some thought as well. Thank you.
Oh, okay. I just want to do what's best for the town.
Thank you very much. Much appreciated. Thank you. So I've turned it off. Okay. So further notice of intention to conduct business in private and notifications of any representations. Please can I ask the Deputy Monitoring Officer to confirm if we've received any notifications?
No, Chair, we haven't.
Thank you. Matters referred to the Cabinet and any report from the Chair of the Overview and Scrutiny Commission as will be normal. Councillor Russell, welcome to your first meeting where you will have a speaking role of the Cabinet. I'll bring you in during each item which has been referred from the Commission. Thank you. Right, so we will start with item 7, considering the off-street parking places consultation. I will be introducing this rather than the Cabinet member, Councillor Hilton, due to a long-standing commitment that Councillor Hilton had made some time before knowing he was being appointed as a Cabinet member. The consultation period has finished and been considered, and as a result, the Cabinet will have seen that the recommendations have changed substantially from the original proposals. We can say as a council quite genuinely that we listened and acted responsively to what we were told. And today I will outline the recommendations we're bringing forward. Before I do, I would say it is not a surprise that telling people that they may have to pay for their parking is not going to be terribly popular. But we have an issue in some of our car parks where too much of the parking was not being used for the purposes for which it was provided by the council, and enforcing controls does require funding to cover some of those costs. So, but just to demonstrate how the proposals have changed, Goffs Park will now be charged at the same price as Tilgate Park, which is consistent and also lower than originally suggested. Also, the hours of charging will end at 6 p.m, which will continue to deter commuters, which is what we said this was aiming to do, but will allow park users and families to use the park later in the summer evenings without charge. This is a balanced approach that improves access for genuine park users by tackling commuter parking, while helping us to meet our financial goals to protect wider council services, which should also help us to invest more in Goffs Park going forward. With regards to the Hall Theatre, valid points were raised about the risk of delays caused by payment processes, especially for performances with strict entry times. There's also a concern that charges could deter attendance, which would impact both the theatre's viability and our cultural offer. Given these sensitivities, we're recommending that no decision is made at this stage. Instead, we'll continue working closely with the operator at the Hall to explore a solution that protects the theatre's operation while addressing parking needs. The major alteration to the proposals is around K2 Crawley. We always knew, and we said it when we began this, that whatever would be required at K2 would be complex. The consultation on how this is done was purely exploratory and no formal charging proposal was made. However, the feedback was clear. The public reaction to charging at K2 was unfavourable. So, given the complexity, we're not going to proceed with charging at K2. There is, however, definitely something that we need to done to introduce parking controls and enforcement at K2, even with us not charging for it. The car park at K2 regularly experiences congestion, safety issues and pressure on capacity, especially during events. And I have been clear that we have a statutory duty to do something to address safety concerns at this site. And indeed, that's something that's been picked up by residents and other customers. Instead, we'll work collaboratively with the operator and other stakeholders to explore non-charging controls, such as improved layout, signage and drop-off zones, to manage congestion and ultimately to improve safety and ensure that paying members can access this site. The proposals for Orchard Street have proved popular, with the majority of respondents supporting these proposals. If the Cabinet agree, we will be renaming the multi-storey as the High Street multi-storey car park to reflect its proximity to this part of the town centre. We will also be implementing the low rate of parking all day set for £3. The additional income derived will help us avoid introducing charges at more sensitive sites like the Hawth and K2. The council will also introduce an annual and periodic pass for residents 24/7 and a slightly cheaper one for town centre and hospital workers, which can't be used overnight. At Kingsgate, the charging changes to design it as more of a short stay car park, as it was always intended to be, up to 4 hours to facilitate shoppers. People can still stay all day, but the high street car park will be more reasonably priced in those circumstances. Kingsgate is a key short stay site for the council, and this structure is designed to improve turnover and support town centre footfall, which is important for local businesses. In closing, these proposals reflect a careful balance between financial sustainability, operational feasibility and community needs. People have been genuinely listened to, and although not everyone will be happy, I am confident that the input has made a real difference to the final results. So, having presented that, I will bring in Councillor Russell to present the Commission's comments.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. Obviously, you've all got the comments and recommendations that were raised at the meeting, so I won't proceed to read through those. I'll just pull out what I think are the salient points. We were reminded of our statutory duty to manage parking safely and effectively, and the whole context of a discussion revolved around that. In our discussions, it was raised because there was a faux pas with the release of some of the documentation that went out, and that was discussed and interrogated and accepted by the Commission that was in human error. Although from other discussions I've had, ironically, it may have actually helped precipitate more information and been of some, oddly, of some value. But we're all quite clear on the Commission that it was in error and the dates didn't add up. It wasn't a predetermined decision. So I think it's worth saying that was dug out by the Commission and accepted. clarification was sought, and we will be looking forward to receiving readjusted financial projections on the money that was expected. So that's something that we went through. As I say, I don't want to proceed to read through what you've got in front of you. Two areas that were discussed in a little bit more depth was K2. And as Councillor Jones has said, of course, nobody's going to want to put their hands up and say, yes, please charge me more. And it was acknowledged that the consultation had been listened to. But one thing that the Commission did want to say is that we would hope that there would be continued work with the management at K2 to try and resolve the problems and issues around access, in particular the public transport and the buses getting in and out. And I think that's something that I would want to stress as well, that the Commission and members on the Commission wanted to bring forward. With regard to the Hawth, there was a discussion around the Hawth and various views were put forward. And it was acknowledged that there will be ongoing discussions with the management of the Hawth about future situations. Councillor Crowe, who of course is here tonight, put in an amendment to the report, which I seconded, which is mentioned in here that in further discussions and consultations, and correct me if I get this wrong, Councillor Crowe, but we've got it here, that in further discussions that the implementation and implications of parking charges in the future be considered. And I think that was with regard possible overspill into adjacent areas. Is that correct? Yeah. Be considered. But I think it was pointed out that as a general rule, whenever there are new charges put into a place, part of the review process would be to consider possible overspill. One never knows what the unintended consequences are of one's actions, but you can try and have a guess and work out what they are. But that's in there as a motion that's come forward. I don't know if there are any questions on anything that I've raised there, or whether that would normally be the procedure. But otherwise, I'll close on that.
No. I think if there was any clarification, I'm sure members of the Cabinet will ask as and when. But I think no. Not usually at this point, but thank you, Councillor Councillor Russell. What I might do is at the end I might respond to the points you've raised that I've picked up on as well. But next I will bring in. Before I bring in Councillor Crowe, I need to welcome Councillor Sue and Councillor Chris Mullins, who. I need to ask if you have any declarations of interest to disclose. No. Naturally. Okay, so no problem at all. It was passed on yet. So thank you, Councillor Mullins. So Councillor Crowe.
Thank you and good evening, Cabinet. Unusually, I was a member of the OSC, so I spoke at this on some length on Monday evening, so I won't speak for quite as long this time. And I suppose I'm coming from a few different roles, really. Obviously, I'm here tonight as Leader of the Opposition, and of course, I was a member of the OSC on Monday night when we discussed it. But of course, I am also a local Furness Green Borough Councillor, which obviously is where the Hawth is situated. And of course, I'm County Councillor for Tilgate and Furness Green. And of course, parking is an issue that obviously county councillors are looked to when issues come up, and certainly displacement parking within my division is something that does come up from particularly Tilgate Park, but also has the potential, if parking charges are introduced at K2 or the Hawth, to that to happen as well. I do welcome the overall movement that there has been. I think the town centre proposals are sensible. I like the idea of having one car park designated for long stay and another one for short stay. And I hope that is successful and does prove to be popular, and certainly trying to get that footfall into the town centre. There has been times where I may have felt that we want to actually put off people, not me, but some people want, in responsibility, want to put off people coming to the town centre through making it difficult to park. And so that is welcome. Turning to the Hawth first, I welcome that it's been delayed, although it is still going to be looked at. And the reason why I tabled the slight amendment to the recommendation from OSC was just to put a bit of emphasis on what the implications could be, and that's not only for the potential for overspill car park. You know, there is one particular, there's the start of wheel drive outside the numbers 2 to 8, where there are parking bays outside those properties where someone would just have to literally just walk across the road to get to the Wharf car park, but also the implications for the Wharf. And I welcome the fact that the council has engaged with the operators of both the Wharf and indeed K2, and certainly I think a few things have come to light from that engagement with those operators that perhaps had not been fully appreciated or understood previously. But I will still reiterate the point that if at some point charging does come in at the Wharf, while it may only be £1.50 to start off with, I have no doubt that once the concept of charging has started and is introduced, that those charges will go up quite quickly once that principle has been established. So we'll have to wait and see what happens with the Wharf. But one of its key attractions is the availability of easy and uncomplicated parking. And there isn't any particular problems. I know there is a little bit of overspill parking from Pembroke Park, etc. But compared to K2, there are no real problems at the Wharf. Turning to K2, and I think the leader did give quite a good summary of there are a lot of complex difficulties around parking there, and we do need the ability at the very least to be able to enforce against bad parking, especially when, for example, when the buses are not able to actually enter and use the bus stops there because people have parked where they shouldn't. And I do see that quite a bit there sometimes when it's busy, vehicles parking not in designated bays, and the ability to be able to enforce against that is important. So I think now we are rightly addressing the issues that there are at K2 in terms of parking difficulties, rather than just having a focus purely on trying to gain income. So that indeed is welcome. Turning to Goss Park, and the leader mentioned it being consistent with Tilgate Park, and yes, he's right with the what is lower than what was proposed, but it's still consistently high. Parking charges at Tilgate Park have gone up twice over the course of the last year, by my reckoning 25%, which is significant, to £1.50 per hour from £1.20. And we'll have to see what impact that has at Goffs Park. But I do recognise, again, there was a problem there with commuters parking all day long and restricting the availability. Whether charging is the right mechanism to address that and not to penalise park users, that remains to be seen. Because while the price is consistent with Tilgate Park, the offer in the park is not consistent. So it could be argued that the amount that is being charged for parking, while it's the same as Tilgate Park, that it is not, there are not as many attractions and things to do and to see at Goffs as there are at Tilgate. But we'll wait and see how that pans out. But I still do welcome the fact that it is being addressed, albeit the fact that somewhat regrettably charging has come in, but we'll see how that pans out. But overall, I do welcome the improvements, and I said that on Radio Sussex this morning. I think they're speaking on this very subject. They seem to like me. They've invited me twice in the last 2 months to speak on this very item on their breakfast show, and I did certainly accentuate some of the positives that we have now seen. Thank you very much, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Crowe. I'll now open the debate for other Cabinet members. I saw Councillor Chris Mullins first, and then Councillor Sue Mullins.
Am I on? Oh, I'm on, yeah. Yeah, thank you for that, Chair. Clearly, parking is a sensitive issue. There's no doubt about that. And anybody who's a motorist doesn't like paying parking charges. And certainly, when I go to other towns, I mean, their parking charges are dearer than ours. We try and keep our prices as reasonable as possible. But if you want to see some parking expenses, go and try and park in Brighton or somewhere. I mean, you get a real shock. Yeah. But look, at the end of the day, as a town council, we have a responsibility to successfully run Crawley and to make balanced budgets. And where we're charging the most are the most valuable sites. Tilgate and Goffs Park are very valuable sites and places where people can have an excellent time. The parks are still free to go into. We don't charge to go into the parks, just to park the cars. If I just talk about Goffs Park for a minute, I mean, we've had tremendous problems with the car park, the lower car park in Goffs Park, due to commuters, because it's a short walk along to the station, and we know that commuters are parking there all day and not bringing out their cars until they come back from wherever it is they've been in the evening. So we actually needed to do something for that, because a lot of genuine park users that might want to go for 1 or 2 hours into the park can't park there. It's blocked up with these all-day commuters. So it's something we've talked about a lot on Goffs Park Working Group, and we've come to the conclusion that something has to be done. The logical thing in the end was to line it up with Tilgate Park's charges, really, which is what we've done. At Tilgate Park, it's the same arguments, because Tilgate is an expensive park to run. It's a wonderful, beautiful park, and is in the top 10 of TripAdvisors. And it's amazing that we can still walk into Tilgate Park free. We're not charged to go in there. And it's the most beautiful park, owned by the people of Crawley. And so we have to run things like the zoo and we have to, and developing the flora and plants in the park. We have a large maintenance team up there that is fundamentally dedicated. Literally, you've never met more dedicated people that work in Tilgate Park than those. They always amaze me when I go and meet them. And I'm so proud of them, because they really, really love the jobs that they do. And they do it with love and dedication. And so we're blessed with our staff, but they can't work for nothing. And our overheads are quite high. So in the end, we've had to come to terms with new charges, and that will probably happen every year, although we'll see what happens next year. But, we have to keep up at least with inflation on charges, or else we're losing money. So nobody likes to do that if they could get away with it. But we have to run the park, and it's about income to the park, quite honestly. As far as the Horth's concerned, it's much more complicated, because when the Horth was built, and I was on the working group for the Horth, for all of it really, and the things we discussed at the time was, well, how can we make this attractive? How does it sit in the region? Are people going to take any notice of the Horth? Will they come here? Things like the fly tower, the size of the Horth and everything, we discussed all those things. But actually the Horth has become a resounding success. It is a successful regional centre. It still has probably about 50% Crawley residents going to it, and probably about 50% of people who come from outside. But people come from all around the town to come to the Horth, and it's important. So, as I say, one of the selling things was that we didn't charge for car parking in the end, and so we've thought about this very carefully. We are worried about overspilling to Furnace Green. That is one of the things that we thought about in our discussions, and we are considering that, and we do understand that. And there are always people that don't want to pay. There is a difference, however, between the attendees at the Horth, the paying customers at the Horth, and those at K2. Because at the Horth, you probably go once every 3 months to a show or something if you're a regular attender. And so the price is, if it was $150 for an evening, on top of the price of your ticket, it's not that great, really. And it would bring that bit of extra income in. But we haven't made a decision to do that. But, I mean, I don't see that as a frightening figure when people are coming to a show and it's a rare appearance at the Horth for them to do that. K2, by the way, is different because it's all club memberships down there. And people go quite often 3 or 4 times a week or whatever. to the gym or whatever it is they're using in there, or the swimming club, and therefore the charges at the K2 are much more complex and do increase the expenditure for the people using K2. We've paused both of those for good reason, and we do need to talk about K2's parking situation and perhaps how they schedule events that go on at K2, and whether they could space out their events so that there's a less of a problem with car parking and things like that. So we've got a lot of things to talk about at K2 with the management, and indeed to follow through with the Horth. Goffscock is fairly straightforward in all of this, I think, really, and I think that we should just simply go ahead with Goffs Park, and obviously we can reassess that, how it works in 6 or a year's time, and see what we make of it. But I think that's the one that we can go ahead with. So I don't think I'm proposing anything tonight, but I would propose that we go ahead at least with Goffs Park, Leader.
Thank you, Councillor Mullins. All the recommendations are on the relevant page, so you can have a look at those and you tell me. But Councillor Sue Mullins.
Thank you very much. Parking is always a hot issue in Crawley, all over Crawley. Unfortunately, when the town was designed, it was designed for 10 houses to 1 car. Now, quite often, it's more like 10 cars to 1 house. Plus, with all the parking that's now come into the town, because companies and businesses don't keep their vehicles overnight anymore in their own premises, and people park outside their houses. And we pulled out of our close tonight, and there was at least 4 or 5 small transit-type vans directly opposite the entrance to the exit to our road. I mean, those are not used for personal use. Those are people who will be disappearing probably sometime tomorrow morning because they're going to work. So parking in Crawley is already a really hot issue, and as Councillor Crowe has already said, places that happen to be adjacent to K2 or the Horth or Goffs Park or in any of those places, they get a hit as well. Particularly if you have to pay for the car parking, because nobody likes paying for car parking. Me as much as anyone else hate it, but unfortunately it's a fact of life these days. As Councillor Russell said, it's our statutory duty to look at parking in the town, and I think we've done that in a really holistic way, because we haven't just looked at each individual car park and said, well, what should we do with this one? What should we do with that one? Our officers have done a really good job at looking at all of our car parks as a whole and saying, what are our car parks used for? Who uses the car parks? What's the best use of them in the future? And I'm all praise to our officers I think they've done a really good job on trying to sort that out, to say, the one at I'm going to go forget the name, sorry. The town centre one is for certain short stay car parking, that we can use the one at Orchard Street for long-term parking. So I think that's been a really inventive way to look at the car parking for the town and to look into the future to how it's going to be used. I mean, most towns and boroughs, if you look around Horsham, Brighton in particular, I got caught there as well. Councillor Crowe, £28, because I took my granddaughter shopping. Not a good idea. No, I shan't be doing that one again. But most towns and boroughs, they do charge for parking all over the place. And when I've been out and about, most of the car parks are far more expensive than what we're doing. And I think our car parks are very well used, and people find it a very good price, even at £3 for the town centre one. That's a really good price for a whole day to go shopping. So, and although I'd like to see some improvements to the car park sometime in the future. I mean, we have a balancing job to do as a council. We have to balance our financial difficulties and where our income comes from, which is shrinking year on year, and our demands on our budgets become higher every year. So we do have to be sensible and look about where does our income come from. And that has to be put against the needs and the expectations of the users of K2 and the Horth and the parks. So I think, once again, this council's taken the problem seriously, looked at it carefully, consulted with everyone, listened to what our residents have got to say, particularly with the people who use places like K2 on a regular basis, and the people who would like to use the park at Goffs Park and at the moment can't because they can't get into the car park at all. It's okay, you've got another little car park up at the top, but if you don't walk very well, or you've got buggies and prams, being able to use the bottom car park is a lot more convenient, especially because it's near the little railway and other areas, the playground and so on. So I'm really pleased with the work that the council's done on this issue, and I'm all power to them. And I know ongoing conversations have to go on about other areas, but they're things for the future and things, again, we'll approach in a sensible, realistic way. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mullins. Are there any other comments? Councillor Nawaz, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. As I think lots said about the car parking issue in Crawley, and I think I agree with everything said by Councillor Mullins, and have to agree with Councillor Crowe as well. It is a hot topic and issue for Crawley, but I'm going to go more detail in it. But just have a quick question on the Orchard car park, Orchard Street. When we're talking about the long-term parking, which probably benefited residents as well of 24/7, which is a really good idea when we're talking about the town centre neighbourhood side of things. But there's no difference between the cost of, it's a quarter, it's a 6 months, and yearly. Why can't we think about, I think it's a really good idea, I agree with that 100%. No, I'm just thinking, is there any benefit for long-term if someone wants to sign up for the whole year? Is a possibility to look into that option? So people are interested more buying long-term rather than no difference to them.
Dan, would you like to come in? Dan Carberry, our manager on this? Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. We have done engagement, and the price point isn't actually the most important bit. It's the flexibility to have a short-term permit was the bit that were fed back both by residents and by businesses in the town centre. And I think obviously we've substantially reduced the cost of parking at that site and applied a 17% discount on residential parking versus if they were paying to park there every day. The structure of the 3, 6 and 12 permit supports people that are staying in Crawley for a short time. So we have Airbnbs that do long-term rentals within the town centre. We also have established residential units that do 3 and 6 month tenancies. And when we look at the users of those short-term residential permits, that's the kind of people. On discount, I would say the amount of administration that is required for either a 3, 6 or 12 month permit is exactly the same. So what is factored into the price of that permit is some of that administrative time. But also when you're looking at residential permits, what's included in that is cleansing of the car park. If you're using it all the time, you would expect it to be clean, well maintained. You would expect there to be CCTV in operation. So that's what people are paying for when they're paying for that residential permit. And by reducing that or further discounting that, it reduces our ability to maintain that and provide that high quality offer that residents are looking for.
Thanks very much. Any other cabinet members? I'm not seeing anyone. Just to respond on a few of the points myself, just to address Councillor Russell and the comments from the OSC. It's a little more difficult for me to comment on the phantom order that appeared, in the sense that this was done as on an operational rather than basis on a policy level. All I can say is that learning will be taken from this, and that was fully discussed at the commission. I'm very acutely aware of the bus problems at K2, and I think in the meantime, while we're sorting that out, users of the car park really do have to reflect quite seriously about whether they're parking in allocated spaces, and if what they're doing is reasonable, because some of the parking I've seen up there and some of the problems it's faced the bus drivers has not been reasonable, and it's one of the reasons we would have to bring something in regardless. It was mentioned Councillor Crowe wanted us to take into account any impact on surrounding areas when we introduce these things. That is already in the strategy. It does take that into account. So it is asking us to do something that the council does already, and I never have a problem with agreeing to do things that the council does already. So that's something that I'm be more than confident will be done. In terms of in respect to the Horth, it's not strictly true that there haven't been any problems at the Horth. There's been a fair amount of blue badge abuse and out of bay parking. They've been the biggest issues at the Horth. I mean, I do encourage everyone to just bear in mind some of the figures. I mean, the proposed amount was £1.50, which on top of the price of a theatre ticket that can be £40 or £50. This doesn't seem excessive to me for a night out. And if people are prepared to park halfway up Furnace Green and sort of walk 10 minutes to the theatre to save £1.50, I'm not convinced A, it will happen that much, and B, if there are people who are that motivated to save that amount, then I'm not sure there's an awful lot we can do to prevent that. I would also agree with Councillor Mullins that there are great things at Goffs Park, and although it does differ from Tilgate Park, there's different attractions to Goffs Park than there are to Tilgate Park. So that's one of the reasons why we're mindful that we don't want to price everyone out of it, and as a result, we've tried to reach a compromise. I would like to ask for a bit of clarification about the Tilgate, because Councillor Crowe raised a point about once you introduce a charge, you can't rely on it not going up exponentially or in an unreasonable manner. And I don't recall our other parking charges doing anything other than increasing gradually once they've been introduced. So the Tilgate increase was mentioned in this 25%. My understanding was it's gone up 10 pence, and I mean, one of the reasons it's had to go up is it needs to be a whole number because we've still got coin-operated machines at Tilgate Park, and so it wouldn't work any other way. I'm just going to ask if the officers can clarify the arrangements at Tilgate, though, seeing as they've been risen. Admittedly, I appreciate they don't form part of this report, but.
Yeah, so Councillor Crowe is right. There were two increases within a year, and that was in November, and there was a delay in implementing a decision that had already been made for Tilgate. And again, I think it's important to note that the Tilgate tariffs are treated very differently to others because it directly funds the activity in the park and helps Tilgate to be a cost neutral offer that generates a surplus income to fund wider council services. On tariff setting, I just want to remind members of the content of the off-street parking strategy that was agreed, that actually sets out a new way in which we will assess when and how tariffs will increase. So it won't be how it typically has been and how it is at many other local authorities where it's an annual increase. Whenever we look at tariffs, we are re-evaluating on the same basis that we did when we introduced the charges using that same framework. For example, if you look at the proposal for Kingsgate, what is factored into that decision is what are the tariffs of our commercial operators. We are not the majority provider in the town centre for car parking spaces, and what members agreed in that strategy was to treat parking on a more commercial basis. So making sure that we're always competitive, we're always the lowest priced option for all residents. So hopefully that reassures members on that annual increase, that actually we're going to apply those same principles every year when we look at what fees and charges to put up.
Thank you, Dan. Is there anything any other cabinet members would like to add? If not, I move that the Cabinet approves the recommendations as set out in 2.2 on pages 12 and 13 of the agenda pack, with the addition that we add the words "and implications" in recommendation 2.2F as requested by the Commission. So, Councillor Nawaz, the second the nomination, thank you. In that case, is that agreed? Agreed. I'm saving you for the next one. We will now move on to consider the extension to Public Spaces Protection Order, PSPO, Keep Your Dog on a Lead in Tilgate Park report. There are also the consultation results that were published in the supplementary agenda, which hopefully all Cabinet members have had the chance to read. Unfortunately, I am in the sad position of having to fill in for another Cabinet member, this time Councillor Yasmin Khan, who is unfortunately not able to join us tonight to present this for medical reasons. I hope that Cabinet members will join me in wishing Councillor Khan a speedy and full recovery in the near future. And in fact, I think there's a fairly decent chance that she might be watching us on YouTube as we speak. But Councillor Irvine is waving if you can't see that, Yasmin. But the proposals in the report are to extend the existing public space protection order for Tilgate Park for dogs to be kept on leads in specified areas for a further 3 years, which is the maximum period permitted. This will be voted on by Cabinet tonight with a final vote of the full Council in July. The current restrictions, the current restrictions which are set out in the report are retained, including the geographical areas. The levels of the fines for fixed penalty notices will also remain at £100 for now. Renewing it on this timeline allows for continuous protection at the relevant parts of the park. I need to stress that the PSPO has been successful and it has certainly been used by the Council. Since it was introduced, I'm informed that the number of injuries and deaths of animals reported has increased to 0 in the park. Also, I've had many anecdotal approaches from park users saying how it has improved their experience when visiting. As I said, the PSPO has been used. In the past 3 years, officers have informed me that it has been used 910 times. This involves the community protection officers giving verbal instructions, with the vast majority of members of the public complying with that request, with only 3 fixed penalty notices needing to be issued. I think this all emphasises the effectiveness of the order and that it works, but it needs a form of legal recourse if people don't comply. I also would say that the order is proportionate for what it is trying to achieve. There is a large area of the rest of the park that can still be used by dog owners without requiring a lead. There are other parks and open spaces not covered by these controls. If this is an insurmountable problem for any of the dog owners, and also it is not as if the council is entirely stopping them entering the control parts of the Tilgate Park. All they need to do is put their dog back on its lead. I would point to the general level of support for the PSPO given within the consultation period. Of those responding, a majority, 59%, were in favour of extending it. Even more satisfying was that the large proportion, I believe it was 95% of people who did respond, confirmed that they were Crawley residents. So I believe it reached the right people that needed to be asked. With that, I'll bring in Councillor Russell to present the Commission's comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. As I said before, you've got the comments, a summary of the comments there. I don't intend to read through them, but just the key issues we raised. There was confirmation from the officers that the legal justification for the PSPO remained unchanged, and it was meeting the legal test. And as Councillor Jones has outlined, there does seem to be an improvement in the situation, certainly with regard to wildlife. On the evening, the OSC did query or members of the OSA, some of the members did query the consultation period, feeling perhaps it was a little bit short, but we were reassured that it met guidelines and fell within those. In general, we were told, and has been confirmed again, that the majority of responses were positive. I'll come to that in a little moment. It was raised at the Commission by some of the members about the possibility of decoupling the park around the lake from the golf course and some of the wooded area that fits within that. That was raised by a member on the Commission, and I think it's worth saying as well, we had another councillor come and spoke quite passionately from the floor on that. I am reporting what was said. It was suggested that within the 59% of positive, you got 59% positive replies, which obviously means 41 less positive, 41%. It was suggested that possibly within that, that if there was a decoupling, that positive response might increase, but I don't think we were able to draw out on that issue. What I would say, though, whilst people did speak quite passionately on it, I can't say it was a majority view for the Commission, but we did. It was discussed, and it was something that is being brought forward by some of the members. Again, that's pretty much the conversations we had. But if there are any questions that come up, then feel free.
Thank you, Councillor Russell. I'll pass over to Councillor Crowe, as he's indicated he wants to speak on this item.
Yes, thank you very much, Chairman. And indeed, I was at the Scrutiny Committee on Monday and did speak to this. And I think Councillor Russell's given a fairly good explanation of what happened during the meeting. And it's nice to have that coming from what happened at Scrutiny. Yes, I was one of the members there who spoke about the golf course, and again, I am the local member that the golf course covers. So again, I'm also, if you like, addressing you in my capacity as a local councillor as well as leader of the opposition. And I commented at Scrutiny that, and indeed Councillor Russell's referenced it, around that there would have been even more support than the 60% in the consultation had the PSPO been for the area around the lake and the park. And you know, I've heard nobody say that it shouldn't be introduced there, and I welcome the fact it's worked well. You know, I did mention on Monday about my daughter being attacked by a dog. This is adult daughter, so it wasn't a child, but it's still of concern for someone to be attacked whilst jogging around the lake from a dog that emerged from the lake where clearly it should not have been, and that was indeed, it was reported to the police at the time. As I say, it's great to hear as well that no attacks on wildlife. But what did emerge during the Scrutiny Commission from my own questioning was that the warnings, the fines, the patrols, they've been all around the lake and the park area, and very little of it related to the golf course because it was not seen as a particular problem. What is potentially of a concern could be the wildlife and deer within the golf course area within the woods. And also, indeed, the leader mentioned the possibility of dogs being hit by golf balls. And I don't think dogs should be running around on the greens, quite frankly. You know, I recognise the golf course is for golfers, and you know, you wouldn't want your golf ball landing in a certain thing, would you? The next shot wouldn't be that particularly pleasant, would it? But of course, there's lots of paths, so there are public rights of way, and people in Furness Green and Maidenbower like to walk their dogs. Indeed, I live about a 5-minute walk from the golf course where I live, and I often walk to the park from home, and I will see people with their dogs off their leads in the golf course area, and no one really turns a blind eye to it, quite honestly, and it's not perceived as a problem there. And I don't think it would be a good use of anybody's time for patrols to be happening within the golf course, quite frankly, unless something serious happened. But I'm not aware of anything having happened relating to anything dangerous to do with dogs, either people or wildlife, within the golf course area. I did ask, and the leader was somewhat amenable to just talking to officers to see whether the boundary, whether there's another option, whether to decouple the golf course completely and just have it around the core area of where this does provide the most value. And indeed, I think the statement, not only from Councillor Jaggard, that she made, indeed the written submission she made as part of the consultation, but also from the Kennel Club as well, about it being proportionate. It does apply to the area around the lake and the park, but not the golf course. And it does reference the perimeter paths, and of course it's already been enforced, but I'm not sure entirely, looking at this, where the perimeter paths actually fall and how clear that is for residents when they walk their dogs. I do just wonder, there is time between now and full council potentially just to look at the boundary and to see, even if it's not the entire golf course, I would welcome a bit more access to the paths around the perimeter for residents of Furness Green and Maidenbower who do like to walk their dogs there, and whether something potentially could come to full council that was slightly different, that just gave a little bit more land for people to be able to run their dogs freely off the lead. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Crowe. I will now open the debate for other Cabinet members. I'll go to Councillor Sue Mullins first this time. Yes. Yeah.
Thank you very much. During COVID and after COVID, there was a huge increase in dog ownership. I think because everything was shut down, people suddenly thought it'd be quite useful to have an animal that you could take for a walk, and just to make your walking a bit more interesting and a bit more exciting. So dog ownership has grown massively, particularly within towns like ours, where people didn't have as much space. That's come along with a lot of problems, obviously, because the more dogs you have, the more problems you have. There was a lot of controversy at the time when we brought in the PSPO to begin with. I can remember sitting here in the council chamber and being yelled at by members of the public who came in and actually had to be ejected from the meeting because they were so aggressive. They considered their dogs had the right to run anywhere, anytime, any place. So I was really glad to see the PSPO come in, and I was really glad to see us stick to our guns and think this is something we need to do for the residents of Crawley to make their lives just a bit more comfortable. Not everybody has dogs, not everybody likes dogs, and not everybody wants dogs running around their legs all the time. I'm really glad that we're extending it again. I wasn't sure that we'd be able to do that easily, but it seems like we've had quite an easy ride to get this through. And I'm glad to see that our residents of this time, when we've consulted, have really supported it as well, which I think is really important. Our residents have a good say in all the things that we do. And it's good to see that we're actually on the same page as them and we are making the right decisions. Now, when you come back to the OSC and the comments that are made from there about the golf course, what concerns me is Councillor Crowe has already said there are safety issues on the golf course. Number one, you don't particularly want your enforcement officers walking around the golf course. Maybe they would have to wear safety helmets and so on all the time. So they wouldn't be safe. Dogs running free on the golf course, I would have thought from any golfer's point of view, as you just said, Councillor Crowe, not only do you not want to walk in certain things, you don't want your golf ball to be landing in it either. I'm not quite sure how that works for your handicap, but not very pleasant. And also, there is no fence. There is no fence between the golf course and the park. And our wildlife does not see barriers drawn on a map. Our wildlife goes where it needs to go. And we've had deer that move from the park into the golf course, smaller creatures that move from the golf course into the park, and they see nowhere this is a dog-free bit, that's not a dog-free bit. There's no notices up for the rabbits to read or the foxes or anything else. So I think having the golf course so close to that part of the park that we're trying to protect is really important that it's covered by the same PSPO. I'm quite sure if you went and tapped anybody on the shoulder who's playing golf and said, would you mind if there was a dog suddenly came streaking across the green just as you took your shot? I think you'd get the answer very clearly, no thank you, that's not what we want. As has been said, there are plenty of areas in the forest, there are plenty of areas around the rest of the park where dogs can run freely, and we protect the areas that are well used by people and well used by families and for our wildlife. It's easy to look at a dog and think it's a really nice, friendly thing. I know we don't talk about personal things normally in the council, but we had an ex-brother-in-law who had 2 small terriers. Nice, friendly little dogs, not very big at all. And when you visited at the house, they were no problem. They sat down, they did as they were told. The owner said, stop, sit down, do what you're told. They did it. When he took them up to the golf course or up to the park, and they were off the lead, they were something else because they just reverted to type and became hunters, and they chased anything and everything they could, and they did not stop until they'd either run it to the ground or they just killed it. And he was quite, I'm glad to say he's an ex-brother-in-law, because he used to be very proud of what wonderful hunters his dogs were. That is not what we want in Tilgate Park or on the golf course. And you might think that's amusing, Mr. Duncan Crowe, but I don't. So I'm really glad we're extending the PSPO. It's what Crawley needs. And once again, we are looking out for our residents and protecting our families who want to go and enjoy the open air. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Sue Mullins. Councillor Chris Mullins, I'll move you in now. Thank you.
Yeah, just to reflect back a little. 3 years ago.
Microphone, Chris.
Oh, sorry. 3 years ago, when we fully debated the need for the PSPO, it didn't come around out of somebody's head just because they fancied putting it in. It came to us to debate because of the conditions, because of the reports, because of the complaints, because of the worries that our residents and park users had about what was going on. People were worried about their children, dogs bounding at their children, knocking their children over and scaring the life out of them. I had many phone calls during that period when we were building the PSPO, and a lot of them were people who were telling me that their dog was turned into a nervous wreck by another dog, that dogs attack dogs. And the idea that dogs are all friendly to one another is not true. I mean, sometimes a dog will see another dog and go for it. And this man was saying to me on the phone, my dog is a nervous wreck. I can't take him out anymore. I've got to be very careful where I take him. And things like that. Now, I've got to say to you that I was on the golf course one day and I witnessed a dog chasing a deer. And a deer, you could hear its heart pounding and its heavy breathing as it ran as fast as it could away from this dog. But of course, because the deer is much bigger than the dog, the deer cannot escape from the dog because there's nowhere a dog can't go after a deer because of the deer's size. And I went and seen the parks manager, who's retired since, and I told him about this, and he said, Chris, it's a major problem. He said, what they do, they don't tend to eat the deer or anything like that. They chase the deer until it drops down dead from absolute exhaustion. And we find the deer's body's just flopped on the ground. And once the deer is dead and lying on the ground, the dog just loses interest in it and goes back. I was at the other side by the other side of by the wall garden. Sorry, I'm getting a bit stumbly. And I was over there talking to that manager who was retired, and a collie type dog, a nice looking dog, was suddenly left its owner and was chasing a deer right in front of both of us. And he chased that deer and chased that deer, and we didn't see it for about 10 minutes or 15 minutes, and I was still there. And the dog came back and ran straight up to its owner, and its owner done nothing but pet it and cuddle it. And I thought to myself, this is awful. How can this be going on here? And I'll remind you again, when we used to have horses up at Tilgate Park, and we used to take children on a big horse cart on tours around the park, which was a lovely thing to do on a Sunday, we had to stop doing it because the horses got attacked by dogs. And one beautiful Shire County horse that we had half its face ripped off by a dog, and it had to be sewn together by a vet, and that had to go to a special place in the country. It couldn't stay in the park. We discussed whether we could carry on with the horses, and reluctantly we decided that it wasn't safe with the dogs on the loose to have the horses up at Tilgate Park any longer. And so he ended that service, which was the most enjoyable thing for most of the children that used it. And so I hope I'm not being too long, but we didn't come to put the PSPO in by accident. We did it because of the swans that were murdered by the dogs, killed, ripped to bits. The little cygnets that were just born were killed by dogs down at the lake. And I've explained that we've had the same thing on the golf course. And right across. Now, the golf course is a playing area which requires an element of hygiene. If you're knocking a golf ball down from the tee onto a green or a fairway, you want it to be clean. You don't want it to have dog muck on it and things like that. And you don't want the risk of dogs running across, and you certainly don't want dogs on the loose. Now, what we've designed in the present boundary of the PSPO was space. We weren't being anti-dog owner. What we wanted to do was educate the dog owners to get them to understand that their animals, whilst they're pets at home, are natural wild animals when they're out in the open. And all dogs are. They revert to what they really are when they're out away from their owners. And so we've said to people, you must learn to keep your dogs on leads, but we've highlighted the areas where they can let them off leads. Now, I do believe that the vast majority of dog owners are decent, caring people who don't want their dogs doing anything wrong. And I think they follow the rules, and we don't have much problem from those people. But there are a few renegade people about who don't want to obey those rules. And we've got an example, I think, that one of the officers could explain in better detail than me, where we had to end up taking somebody to court who got very, very heavily fined because he would not obey the PSPO. Now, we cannot change the PSPO now. It would be wrong to do that. People have been educated. We've spent 3 years getting them to understand. If our wardens are not checking on the golf course, then I would like to talk about that perhaps in another place, because I think there should be some visits to the golf course by our officers to check that things are going okay there. But the reports that we were having before are much, much less now, and things are much better. And we are a successful situation where the PSPO has worked and people have learned, they've educated themselves, and they know what they can do, and they take their animals to areas where they can roam them, and then in the other areas they keep them on the leads. And I don't want to upset that apple cart now. We have taken 3 years to get to this point in time, and we have been successful. So let's keep it there. I would be absolutely opposed in all circumstances to separating the golf course from the rest of the PSPO, because the ground, the area, the topography is not separated. It's open. And that means that if you don't have those barriers there, that the dogs could roam into any area completely, and we need to keep that restricted. It works, and if it works, it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Thank you, Councillor Mullins. Councillor Irvine, I think I saw you next.
Okay, thank you, Chair. I've got a few comments and brief comments you'll be happy to hear, and a question or two. First of all, I think in some ways we ought to be actually quietly congratulating the people who do walk their dogs up at Tilgate Park, because they're actually doing the right thing by the animal, the dog that they've undertaken to look after. There are, unfortunately, people who don't exercise their dogs, and that dog will then suffer by it. So by taking the dogs for a walk, not only are the dog owners doing themselves a favour, they're also doing something which is essential for the dog's well-being. Now, I do remember 3 years ago when this was first mooted, I was a member of the Overview and Scrutiny Commission. I was fairly agnostic about the whole thing. And one of the concerns that was raised at the time was that if this was brought into Tilgate Park, then it might just mean that instead of people walking their dogs off, taking their dogs off the lead at Tilgate Park, they just go to a different park in Crawley and let the dogs off the lead there instead. So the same problems would happen somewhere else that the SPSO was trying to prevent at Crawley
at Tilgate Park. So I just wonder if there's any evidence of that happening. And finally, I was at the OSC the other night in my capacity as Cabinet Member for Housing, and it was agreed that we would be receiving some, or we'd require some further advice from officers in relation to the comments that were made by Councillor Jaggard. And I just wonder if we've had that advice.
Thank you, Councillor Irvine. Can I bring in the officers to comment on the questions that you've raised?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. On displacement, that there hasn't been a huge amount of the very few problematic individuals that were very resistant to the order initially. They have gone to other parks where they can have their dog off a lead completely unrestricted. But generally, the consensus is that dog walkers that still use the park are still doing so. Whilst we've had to have as Councillor Jones said, 910 conversations. Actually, most people have complied, and I think the success in that is because the officers have focused on the fact that the dogs on lead instruction protects wildlife, and I think that's potentially been a massive strength in the behaviour change.
Thank you very much. Councillor Rem, did you? Sorry.
I also asked if we've received the advice that we asked for on Monday night about the Councillor Jaggard's comment about removing part of the park from the PSPO.
I think I've received some advice, but I haven't passed it on. So, would the officers like to just outline for Cabinet members?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, we did forward advice on to you as Chair of the Cabinet. Ultimately, it's a matter for full council to decide, and Cabinet has been asked to send the report forward either amended or as it is. We were asked specifically on excluding the golf course from the PSPO and the impact of that. There's no operational impact for removing it, so from a practical point of view, it could be done. We looked at various aspects around consultation and so on, and enforcement. We said on the evening of OSC that there have been 910 interventions. That's true. None of those have been around the golf course. Part of that is because we focus our enforcement action around the lake, and so we haven't got any statistical evidence or data evidence to suggest whether it's being enacted or not, or whether people are complying or not around the lake. Around the golf course. We did look at the public consultation, and 64% of the people who said no, they didn't want the PSPO would have supported it if we'd excluded the golf course from that. And as I think Councillor Russell said, Councillor Crowe said, the Kennel Club also highlighted whether it was excessive or proportionate. I think the reasons that the golf course was included in the first place were outlined by Councillor Mullins earlier, and that was evidence that the Cabinet heard at the time. We've got nothing in terms of enforcement over the last 3 years and gathering new data. We've got nothing either to further support or to dismiss that original decision. So there's nothing in terms of what we have gathered that says that decision was either right or wrong, because most of our enforcement work has happened around the lake.
Thank you. Thank you for that answer. Are you happy with that, Councillor? Yeah, thank you. Would any other Cabinet member like to speak, or no? No. In that case, I'll just come back on a few items in summing up. Councillor Chris Mullins is absolutely right. I seem to remember that this wasn't done in the first place because this council was looking to upset people. It was because we originally got introduced because we had a petition from members of the public on this, because they they were upset with what they were seeing and what they were experiencing at the park. Moving to Councillor Crow's comments, Councillor Crow, I won't recommend you take a page out of Robert Jenrick's book and go and confront those people breaching the PSPO that you see. But in terms of, I think you alluded to this. I do agree with the need for the areas that are affected, whatever they are, to be clearly identified, and that involves signage. And I think we were all aware there were initially some problems with at least one aggrieved park user who was removing some of the PSPO signage, but that has subsided, I'm pleased to say. We've replaced many of these signs, but we'll also be using the Tilgate Park rebranding of the signage to make sure more signs will be incorporated into the relevant area, so there'll be less risk of people wandering in and not realising they've walked into the wrong area without a lead on. Speaking personally about changing the proposed geography, I said at the OSC on Monday I wasn't yet personally persuaded of the case for removing the golf course. I'm still not personally persuaded to remove the golf course from the footprint of the PSPO, but it's up to the Cabinet and then the full Council to decide the final borders. One reason why I don't personally think it's a good idea, however, is that there has been in the past and will continue to be a danger to the dogs themselves and their owners from wandering around a golf course with being hit by golf balls. Perhaps almost more importantly, there's the wider issue of danger to the fawns, larger deer and other wildlife on the golf course and within the forest if you've got dogs doing this. I think Councillor Mullins was right. What happens is dogs can chase deer to the point that they either die of exhaustion or fear, and that is something that we, I'm mindful of at least. And I think the final point I wanted to make on this is that one of the reasons I think it should be extended for another 3 years is that the bottom line is this has worked. It has been applied reasonably because the community protection team have explained why they're making the request to park users to put their dogs in lead in the areas, and I think people have adapted, and that's why I think we haven't had the same reaction as last time, and it's received wider approval this time. We're not going to please everyone, we never do, but I think on balance, although I will check when we get to this point, I'm happy to submit it to full council to make the final order as it is drafted. So on that basis, before I move on to the recommendation, I did promise the Commission that what I would do is I would ask Cabinet if anyone wishes to make an amendment or any changes to the areas proposed. Okay, Councillor Irvine. Sorry, you can test the water, Councillor Irvine. Yes. Oh, can you put your microphone on? Sorry.
Well, my amendment would be that we put forward the proposal as it is, but take out the part that was talked about the other night, which I believe was the golf course area.
Well, that's not leaving it as it is, strictly speaking, then, is it? Can we just take a look at? Would it be in the recommendation we'd have to change? I'm guessing from if I ask Democratic Services. So it would be to consider the report, and it lists the areas, the restricted area covering the main lake, Peace Garden, lawn area, children's play area and golf course within Tilgate Park as shown in Appendix B. So you're proposing that and golf course is deleted?
Yeah.
Okay. with the implied addition that we add the word "and" between lawn area and children's play area, I suppose, in order to keep it. Yes, yeah,
Absolutely technical.
absolutely, yes.
And, yeah.
In that case, do you have a seconder, Councillor Irvine? Okay, Councillor Nawaz, that means it can go to a vote. All those in favour of making the amendment? Oh. As well. Okay, well, I think on this occasion it possibly doesn't. Well, okay, well, no, given the sensitivity, if you would like to briefly speak on this, Councillor Mullins, yes.
Yeah, I would completely oppose that amendment. I just think it's wrong. I think that what we've created in the PSPO works. I think people respect it. I think that we don't want dogs running loose all over the golf course. And if we're not policing it properly now, I think that we should look to policing it a bit better than what we do. But to suddenly change this and sort of cut out the golf course would be a massive change to that PSPO, and would mean that dogs were well, they could go over to the other areas very easily because they would be out of control of their owners. The whole reason that we put the whole lot in was sensible. It was to contain it, and there is massive amount of area in Tilgate Park for people to exercise their dogs. I'm really surprised that we even got a move to try and take this decision tonight. I absolutely oppose it, and I want to keep the PSPO geographical boundaries exactly the same as what we've had them for the past 3 years.
Thank you, Councillor Mullins. As an amendment has been proposed and seconded, I will now take. Oh. Okay, Councillor Irvine, microphone.
I do tend to keep my comments brief. I'll just say that I think for a lot of people in Crawley, the subject of exercise their dog is very sensitive and subject. And I think there has been a case made for allowing people to exercise their dog around the golf course. We've heard that there hasn't been any incidents recorded, bad incidents recorded around that area, so I think it's just...
I accidentally touched that. You've muted. Have I? Oh, can you tell? Sorry. I apologise for that, Councillor Evan. I may have done something that means that not everyone at home heard you, but... beg your pardon. I by accidentally missing the button and hitting the screen, I think I might have done something to the sound system. But
I'll put it in point. Still muted.
Yeah, it's still muted, I'm afraid. Have I muted everyone but myself?
Right.
Yeah, sorry about the technical difficulties to anyone watching at home. Councillor Evan, would you like to just say that again?
Yeah, as I said, Chair, I'll try and do it in bullet points. First of all, it may be surprising that this amendment has been moved, but of course we are a democratic organisation and a democratic party, and that's what democracy requires sometimes. Secondly, I think that we've heard that there haven't been any bad incidents happening at and around the golf course. So, with that in mind, I don't see the need for people to be restricted in how they exercise their dogs there. And thirdly, it just, to me, makes a more liberal approach to people who exercise their dogs and who are, in the vast majority, perfectly sensible and competent dog owners.
Thank you, Councillor Irvine. And now everyone's had an opportunity to speak on that. I'm going to move to a vote. We've had an amendment to the recommendation 2.2a to remove the golf course from the list of restricted areas. All those in favour? That's 2. All those against? That's 4. So the amendment fails. Thank you. In that case, as the recommendations remain unchanged, I move that the Cabinet approves the recommendations as set out in paragraph 2.2 on pages 49 of the agenda pack. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Chris Mullins. And all those, is that agreed? Agreed. Thank you, Cabinet. That is agreed. We will now move on to consider the forward programme of key procurement, July-December to 25 report. I'm not going to say too much on this other than the forward procurement forward programme is here. If there's anyone cabinet member who'd like to ask any questions on this, then I'll pass it over. Other than that, I will just move it as tabled. But can I ask if there's any cabinet members? I don't see anyone having indicated. Therefore, I move that the Cabinet approves the recommendations as set out in 2.1 on page 67 of the agenda pack. Can I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Sue Mullins. Yes, we'll. Is that agreed? Agreed. Thank you, Cabinet. We now move to exempt business. So I move that under Section 100A, subsection 4 of the Local Government Act 1972, the public be excluded from the meeting for the following items of business on the grounds that they involve the likely disclosure of exempt information as defined in Part 1 of Schedule 12A of the Act by virtue of the paragraphs specified against the items. Is that agreed? Thank you, Cabinet. The recording and live stream will now finish, so I wish to thank anyone for watching. I hope you have a pleasant evening in this very seasonably good weather. May I wish everyone in the press and public galleries a very pleasant evening as well. Thank you. We will now move into the exempt business. Thank you.